Hey folks, how's it going? Dr. Spin. I got another spin-off post for you guys. It's a couple of albums by this time pretty well-established artists, but only one of these albums can go on to be in my favorite albums from 2025, so I have to figure out which one it's going to be. And this is a really tricky situation, because on the one side, we've got Ozzy Osbourne's Diary of a Madman versus Queen and their debut album, Queen 1. They would go on to be one of the most probably beloved bands of the 1970s. And what's fascinating about this album to me personally is that everything that Queen came to be defined by is established on this album, 90% of it. The stacked vocals, Brian May's guitar tone and the way that he orchestrates guitar solos, all those things are kind of here, and the sound of Queen is established from the very outset, as if from the head of Zeus. And compare that over here to Ozzy Osbourne's second solo album he made after he left Black Sabbath, and the last one with Randy Rhoads. And what you see Ozzy doing here is really teetering on the cusp of what would become 80s kind of glam metal. Now, he wasn't a glam guy, he wasn't a hair metal guy, but that style of kind of pop metal, he's establishing that sound here, along with, again, the fantastic and idiosyncratic guitar playing of Randy Rhoads, who adds a level of nuance to this album I think that's very hard to ignore. And when I saw these two albums were headed towards each other, I really thought that Queen was going to shut this out, because Queen is one of my favorite bands. I hold them in super high regard, and I will not say that everything they've done has ever been flawless, but their track record's pretty solid of really engaging songwriting and musical composition kind of both combined into their music. And again, they do that here in this album, but I kept on coming back to this Ozzy album. There's something about it I found really attractive, and I couldn't figure out why I kept on finding myself preferring it over this Queen album. But I came to realize that Queen's ambitions on this album in some ways worked against them whenever you look at it in comparison to what Ozzy was doing here, because Ozzy's music here is very, very relatable. Ozzy's strength has always been in his melodic sense. He doesn't have a huge range as a vocalist, but he has a very characteristic vocal tone that in some ways is as characteristic as Freddie Mercury's. And his lyrics in some ways, despite having this sort of, evil image that he was projecting at the time, are very street level and address the everyman's viewpoint very often. So in some ways, Queen's ambitions in this album, again, hold him aloof in a way that Ozzy doesn't. But I also have to admit that there's a certain zeitgeist with Ozzy in 2025 that's kind of hard to pass up. He, of course, passed away just a few weeks after having his big final concert in which, he rallied all these people around him. He couldn't have thought of a better, almost funeral for himself than to have gone out and did what he did. So even though I am looking for the best music in 2025, I'm also looking for albums that kind of express or represent what happened during the course of the year. And all things being equal, both these albums being fantastic, I think remembering Ozzy in 2025, it probably has a little more weight, I think, than remembering Queen in this time. Although this is a fantastic album and a debut album that any person would be envious of. But in this case, I have to go with Ozzy's Diary of a Madman. So agree or disagree, please sound off below. Then head over to my YouTube channel, where you'll find more posts on independent artists and classic deep dive reviews.